Now, our last question comes in from Cheng Vang in regards to the controversy we talked about last week about The Verge issuing DMCA takedown orders against YouTube channels that were criticizing their PC build video. They picked out two that they felt used the most of the original work in their video to kind of send a message to other creators to maybe back off of them a bit. And I got this response from Cheng Vang, and I wanted to put it up because I think it's a viewpoint that not a lot of people had in this whole thing, and I think it's worth discussing. So he talked about a couple of things, but the big issue that he felt where I was wrong was that the two creators in question here had used a good portion, if not all, of the original video in their criticism, and he felt like that really did constitute a copyright violation. But unfortunately, I think, or maybe fortunately for us creators, the law is a little bit more nuanced than just the amount. A lot goes into it. And I think what might be worth looking at is the H3H3 case, which involved H3H3 Productions making a video commentating and critiquing a video that somebody else made. This guy named Matt Hoss had done a video that they just kind of lampooned and used a lot of clips of the original, probably a significant portion of the original work. And Matt Hoss, the creator of that original video, decided to sue them for their critique, saying that it involved defamation and copyright infringement. And the Kleins, who are the owners of H3H3, made their case on the fact that this was a fair use commentary, and it resulted in a lawsuit that ended with a judgment, which is very unusual right now to have a YouTube creator who could actually afford to go to court and fight it out and establish some precedent here for long-form video, which is where all of this dispute and debate comes from, because this is a new medium that hasn't been tested like all the other mediums that have come before it, and I think this case is really important for that. So I wanted to just briefly run through the judge's order here and some of the factors that she used in determining that that critique video that they did, even though it used a large proportion of the original work, was in fact fair use. And you can see the case here linked on screen. And what she considered were the four non-exhaustive factors of what fair use means. And that's what's so critical about this, is that every case is different. So until we have a lot of cases that define these factors in different ways, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of the law being tested like this as we move forward. But just as a basis here, the factors that were considered was the purpose and the character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is for non-profit educational purposes. And of course, this is also referring to the client's right to critique other work, and that becomes a big basis of this decision. The second factor is the nature of the copyrighted work, whether or not it is fiction or nonfiction. A fiction story probably has greater protection because the story itself is a created work, as opposed to a nonfiction story that might talk about something that happened in the world that is factual and other people can talk about. So I can't just tell you the story of Star Wars and call it my own, but I can tell you the history of World War II, for example, and be able to communicate something that other people might have told in a similar way. The third factor, the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole, and that comes up in this case. And the fourth is the effect upon how that use of the copyrighted work might hurt the potential market value for the original work. Now, if we go into the decision itself, on the matter of copyright infringement, the judge says that the Klein's use of the Hoss video makes it clear that Claim 1, which is the copyright fair use argument, must be decided in the defendant's favor. They weighed a whole bunch of different factors here, but they determined that the most important factor in this case was the criticism and commentary. She felt that that factor rose above the others. So let's take a look at some of the other factors and where those came into play. So remember, that second factor was the nature of the allegedly infringed work. Matt Hoss argued that his video was a work of fiction, where the Kleins, H3H3, were saying, no, it was a work of nonfiction, because Hoss was saying that this was a story from his life that actually happened, and the judge didn't buy that. So on the second factor, the judge said, you know what, they are wrong here, the defendants. Hoss's video is a creative work, and therefore weighs against a finding of fair use because it was a work of fiction. But again, these are all different weights that you have to apply in the context of what was the work about. So they lost on factor 2, but they won on factor 1. Now, the third factor here involves how much of the original work was used. And of course, this goes to the argument that some who have been defending The Verge say makes this a clear-cut case of not being fair use. And in fact, in this case, the defendants, H3H3 Productions, argued that the original Matt Haas video made up only a small proportion of their video. However, the judge says the defendant's analysis gets the math backwards because it really is a matter of how much of the original copyrighted work did you use to make your point. But the judge also says that the quantity alone is not determinative in a fair use argument. And if we continue on her discussion in regards to this, she dives deeper and says here, the extent and quality of importance of the video clips used by the defendants was reasonable to accomplish the transformative purpose of critical commentary. But she does say this factor is therefore neutral because a great deal of the plaintiff's work was copied, but such copying was plainly necessary to the commentary and critique. And again, you can see how nuanced this all is. It's not just how much you used, it's how you used it. And in this case, they used a good portion of the original video, and she says, the defendants are right, but the plaintiffs are also right here, so I have to factor in these other factors to make a full determination. And finally, with the fourth factor, which is the argument that it would detract from the commercial value of the original, the judge doesn't buy the argument from the plaintiffs because she says the Klein video does not offer a substitute. It does not and indeed cannot usurp a market that properly belongs to the copyright holder, and therefore she weighs the fourth factor as a fair use argument here. And ultimately, her decision again looks at whether or not this was legitimate commentary. Even though some of the other factors were a little bit weaker, the fact is that because they were criticizing the other video, and it was very clear that they were doing that throughout, those factors of criticism weighed much more heavier in the judge's eyes than some of these other matters here. So I think if the Verge thing ever went to court, it would have been an interesting case, but they were only arguing their case on the substantiality of the content used, not the other factors of commentary, criticism, and in the case of 8-Bit with Kyle, parody, which is all protected under the law here. So I think they would have won, but it probably would have cost them as much as H3H3 would have had to spend to defend their case. Now, I am not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice, but my suggestion would be that if you are providing criticism of other creators and other creative works, to look at this decision and have that factor into your thought process as to how you put your commentary together. And I would look at that video also, because that video held up in court and others might as well. And this could be how you do it. And I think that's going to be really important as more and more copyright holders like The Verge try to assert themselves legally against some of us smaller creators. And it also speaks to the importance of maybe getting an insurance policy to protect you against these kinds of claims. I have one. It's very expensive, but I'm glad I got it.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Anuj Zaveri, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.